Morning, teachers, parents, friends, whoever is live with us early in the morning, to have a wonderful session about teaching English as a second language in Kuwait, and especially from an administrator's perspective. My name is Sevag, and I come from a school, from an American school, where we teach English as a second language, where most of our students are Kuwaiti students, where they learn second language English. This short talk in the morning will be what is our perspective as administrators when we come to know about learning English. And the best way to start this conversation is to mention that teaching language or teaching English as a second language, first, there is the first part, which is teaching. So I want to focus 1 minute about the teaching as a teacher, and then talking about the subject as English. When we talk about teaching, teaching is one of those highly valued professions where a teacher is dedicated to the student is learning, the student is the center of the attention in the classroom, and the teacher is doing everything possible to make this student learn the content. And when we talk about teaching English, we're talking about a language, a second language, an additional language to the student, where the student is learning it sometimes willingly, sometimes forcefully. It depends on where the student comes from. So, if we look at the students who are learning language, we're saying that this student, or we're assuming at first, that this student knows a certain language, which is their mother language, which is their mother tongue language. In our case, in our students, we have, of course, the Arabic as their first language, and all students speak Arabic. They speak it, they practice it, they read, they write, and then here is where you come and teach them a second language. As an administrator, you look into this as an additional or a second language to the student. It's very important to understand that learning a second language, although sometimes it might be a challenge to teachers and students, but it's one of the best things that we can give to our students in terms of their mind, in terms of their thinking. In a recent conference at ECIS, we learned that students who are bilingual, or individuals in general who are bilingual, they have the ability to make decisions faster. They have the ability to make the correct, accurate decisions. Although they are not very good in memorization, but they are good and very good in analysis, for example. And the mind of a student who is bilingual works way different than a monolingual. So having said that, and I always say this, that if you speak or try to speak a second language, you're already ahead of many people around the world. You're already at a different level, a different category. So, when you do mistakes in the second language, that also means that that's fine, because you already own or have a first language. So, one of the best things that I have learned as an administrator when it comes to teaching language to students is from a famous Indian researcher, Dr. Sugata Mitra, from his famous TED Talk about how children learn. And I'll post this on the forum already. I've posted it on the forum already. And this is where the doctor has put a computer out of nowhere, in the middle of nowhere, and connected it to internet. And then within some time, when he came back and he observed the students who had no access to language, who had no access to a second language, how students picked the language, how students picked the accent even of that computer and learned the language. To me, this tells me basically that all students have the readiness to learn. Yes, we have some cases, we have some anomalies, but that's something else. But all students have the ability, have the willingness or the readiness to start or learn another language. So here is where it's the task, our task as the adults, into how to get this second language into the students. And I'm not going to go into strategies today in terms of what are the strategies to approach students, because that's what teachers usually do, and they have a bunch of strategies to it. I will talk more about the mindset of a student, a mindset of a bilingual or an English as a second language speaker student. In the mind of a student, starting from lower KG up into grade 12, we as adults we're trying to force this student to learn the second language. And the more we force the student to learn the second language, the more we face resistance, the more we face like sometimes not willingness. And this is where I think it breaks down. And I believe the very first fault of us as adults is forcing students. I believe in encouraging students to speak a second language. I believe in allowing or giving ways to students to explore a second language. And when I say this, and currently with all the technology available or with the means available, there is always a way to get to the student to explore the second language. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the dual iceberg model, where it says language 1, language 2, and the basics of all language. And if you're good at one language, the basics of the language is there, and then here you are with the second language, which is the spoken part of the language. You're communicating differently with another language, but you're thinking, the basics, and all language is pretty much have the same concept, has the same base as in the iceberg. I ask you if you can look into the dual iceberg model of language, and you will realize that the languages are different in the way it's spoken, but in the end, in the basics, in the heart of it, it's all the same. Sorry about that. So the second concept is about the mindset of the teachers, and how are we as adults going to approach the students. And when I talk about the teachers, we're talking about the methods, the strategies, the methodology, the approaching the students, and how are we going to find the ways to get to the student to like this language. In one of the discussions in the forum was, is it okay to force students to speak in English and not allow them to speak in Arabic? And it's forbidden to speak in Arabic in class, it's forbidden to communicate in Arabic in class. I believe that the more we put constraints, the more we put problems to the student, the more the student will dislike what they are doing or what they are learning. And the opposite is true. If in any situation, in any format, we allow the students to communicate with each other in their simple language, in their basic language, that will give them all the willingness to learn or to move on into the next language. And as a mindset, I always say about what is there for the student in learning a second language. Yes, I know we force our kids, we ask them to learn a second language, but the student is thinking, what is there for me? And and in this age, we're thinking of, how can I tell the student that this is something good for you? How am I going to explain to them? And here is the task of all teachers, not only the language teacher. And now schools currently, and I can speak of our American school, where we have specialized teachers to teach the English as a second language, but that's not only the task of that one teacher for that group of students. The task is for all of us. And if we're talking about, for example, teaching math in high school, it's the same thing as teaching English or any other subject in middle school, where all of us share the responsibility of working with these ESL students or working with them in terms of language learners. And in science, it's the same thing, where it comes to the terminology, where it comes to the ways of explaining to the student. So it's a shared responsibility among all teachers. It's not a particular responsibility of someone. And if I dive into a little bit into the parts of language, and I'm not a linguistic or a language person, but I can tell you that there are different parts of the language where we teach in our schools, where there is the deep down comprehension, there's the research skills, and there's the writing part, which seems very complicated for an ASL student. But at the same time, there's the speaking, there's the communication, there is the listening, the viewing. So this part of the language, which could be easily utilized or relatively easier to utilize with the student compared to the writing. So if I focus on ASL learners as an administrator, I would say let's focus on certain aspects that makes the second language attractable or attractive, and then move on into the harder or the deeper aspects of the language where it goes to the writing. So if, for example, I have an ESL student and my first goal or intention is to teach them how to write, I might fail. If I'm trying to teach them how to comprehend something, I might fail. So it's very important that we understand the parts of the language where we can focus on as an ESL student, and how deep we go progressively. And I understand that this is different in different schools. It's done differently in government schools or the public schools versus the private schools, and or in the private American schools. In my experience as the American system, although students from pre-K, they start the language, picking up the second language, as with the Arabic language, and as they go on level by level, and as they learn or as they grasp the second language, and it gets to a point where you don't differentiate if the student is speaking English as a first or a second language. And this is all done because the students have that capability, they have that readiness to take this second language. And it's the same thing if you go to a third language or a fourth language. Now, I don't know how many languages technically can someone learn or speak, but there are always there's always the readiness of a person to look into this. Now, one of the concerns that I want to talk about, and this was a question that came earlier in the forum by Hanouf, if I'm not mistaken, when she was asking about what's the biggest challenge of a second language. I believe that one of the biggest challenges nowadays with our generation of students is our parents' input or the parents' influence. And I say this because we come from a generation where language was taught in a certain way in schools, in certain methods or strategies, and now we have different sets of strategies. To my knowledge, the English language didn't change that much, but the ways have changed, the strategies have changed, the technology has changed. And here we are as educators trying to find the best strategies and ways to approach the new generation students, to approach them in such a way that they can learn better. And when I say their methods or their learning styles, and this is what I wanted to say about that students have their way of grasping a language. They have their ability to grasp it if we give them the opportunity. So my encouragement is for us as educators, and our goal as educators for students to learn a second language, I believe should be, and it has to be, allowing students or giving them the opportunities to grasp the language or to take that language. And if that opportunity is not there, if that opportunity is still the same opportunities of when parents were learning a second language many years ago, then this student might not interact with the same method, the same way we or as the parents did in the past. So we have a lot of technology around, we have a lot of ways around, tools around, and it is true that technology is a tool to help the students to learn a language, and also at the same time giving the opportunity to the student to have an interaction with the language, way broader than before. If we go back 20, 30 years ago, the only interaction could have been the radio or the TV or a friend who speaks the language. But today, that interaction is right in the room with the person, with the student sometimes, where they have that interaction to the language. And it is not a mistake to allow the student to look for meanings or to talk to somebody to look for a meaning for another language. So this is my kind of encouragement to all of us as adults or as educators to give opportunities to the students. The more we open up the ways and the opportunities for students to grasp or accept a language, the more they will excel and they will learn better. In that, I want to go back to Dr. Mitra's experiment where he did it in India, then he did it to London, in London again, and he found the same results everywhere. That if you allow the students opportunities, and in his experiment he removed the teachers, by the way, but that's not what I'm saying. We still want to keep the teachers in the classrooms supporting the students. But in his experiment, what he did only is he gave them the tools and he gave them each other as a group of students. And children learn from each other, and children learn language from each other. And here is our role to come and support this and to make this happen. The last part that I want to highlight about this topic is what are the ways that different teachers or different groups of teachers can interact about such topics. Because we all come from different environments. I come from a Lebanese curriculum. I'm working right now in an American school where other teachers work in an American, a British, or any system. Teaching is the same profession. The students have a different background maybe, or have a different curriculum to be taught, but our goal as teachers is the same goal. Our focus is the same focus. Yes, we might come from different environments, we might come from different curricula or backgrounds, but our goal is the same goal. How do we get the student from point A to point B in this amount of time? And who decides the point A to point B is currently the curriculum, we like it or not, but this is how it is. But my point is, in whatever environment you are right now, in whatever classroom you are right now, and we say this and sometimes we make fun of it, that as administrators we sit in offices, we make rules, and the real action happens with the teachers in the classroom. When one teacher is working with a group of students, that's the real learning. The real learning does not happen in my office, it happens in the classroom. So that teacher in that moment with the group of students, you have all the ways and all the strategies to talk to the students, to introduce them to a language or to a second language, and that's nothing binds you to give them the opportunity to learn this language. My last sentence would be, everyone says, and you have read this maybe 10 million times, that students are like sponges, and I would say that students are ready to learn. And the minute we are ready to teach them, the minute we are ready to give them the opportunities, they are ready to learn. And kids get motivated when they see us motivated. Kids get encouraged and inspired when they see us encouraged and inspired. If they see me as an administrator that I'm not enthusiastic about what I'm doing, guess what about their learning? So that's kind of my message altogether. And I think now we can look into some questions, some if you have any questions you want to post on the forum or on Instagram, and we'll try to take them one by one. I'll start with one of the questions here on the forum that I have in front of me. Layal says, how did you make the English learning process easier for you? And what do you think is the best strategy to teach students with? I wouldn't say easier. Things are not easy when you are working with a group of students, but I would say that it all becomes to the point of encouragement, inspiration, and how do I approach my students. That's kind of what I would do. And when I was a teacher in class, I've done the same thing. In my math classes, I've done the same thing. It's all about that encouragement and the inspiration. And the best strategy to teach students with is to allow them opportunities. Give them as many opportunities as you can. You will read pages and pages on Google about strategies. It's all there. You will see lots of programs nowadays that they will TESOL, TEFL, all these words. And every day there is a word for an English language learner. English as a different language, and a whole bunch of acronyms. But the bottom line is, what is it that we offer to them, to the students, as opportunities? I have another question here from Kautar. As an experienced teacher, can you give a beginner teacher an advice to motivate the students or manage students in the classroom? I would say that you answer your second question by the first question. Managing the classroom comes from motivating the students. That's my belief. If I'm able to motivate, if I'm able to encourage my students, my management or issues in the classroom will be technically less. If students are engaged, then their motivation to do other stuff in class will be less. So your main question would be, how do you motivate students? I believe with the motivation of students comes first from your willingness to accept them where they are. In other words, not all your students are the same, not all of them come from the same background, and they know that, they know this, they know that they don't come from the same background or they are not the same with the others. But the minute we as teachers accept them where they are and we take them from wherever they are to the next level, that will motivate them. Understanding the student, I think, is the best strategy I would do. Understanding where they are and taking them to the next level. I hope that answers your question. Yesterday we had another question very late about how is it that after 12 years of learning English, sometimes we see students in high school where they still don't know the language, they don't have the language. Lujain was posting this question, and we had a talk back and forth on the forum, and I invite you all to be part of this forum. It's an amazing one on Sharek, that you would see a lot of questions, answers, perspectives. Sometimes you don't agree maybe, but these are perspectives, and in education you have all perspectives. Her question was very, I call it the $1 million question, that how is it that sometimes students go to school for so many years and still they don't know the language? And on the other hand, they go to a learning center somewhere and they get the language within 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. So we must have been doing something terribly wrong, or the other centers are doing something maybe obviously very well. I don't know. So my answer to this is always you need to look at what percentage of our students are facing this situation and in which areas. If we're talking about certain schools where the curriculum is built in such a way where students' language abilities, specifically the English abilities, are lower, then I would not be surprised to see the student in grade 12 cannot even speak proper English. But if this problem was in a school where the curriculum is structured in such a way that students learn the language from pre-K up until grade 12, I would be surprised to see such a student. But at the same time, it depends on the curriculum itself. What are we offering? What are our expectations as a school, and what do we expect our students to learn? And here is our biggest question about curriculum, and that's a very different discussion. Which curriculum is right, not right? I think those are bigger questions that I personally cannot answer. Asayel says, what do you do as an administrator of a child struggling with family issues, but when you ask the parents to come for a meeting, they show no interest in their child's education? Asayel, this is very common. and we have seen it in our environments here or even in Lebanon. When a child, and as you know, when children struggle with family situations, and this is something very hard to talk about, It's not an easy topic to talk with the child or the parent, and that's why people avoid it. In many of these situations, it is best to build relationship with the child. It's best to build a relationship with the parent in such a way when they feel comfortable to talk to you. If we go with our standard classical way of your child did not, your child is expected to do but is not doing, if we go with the classical hard way, many students and parents don't accept that anymore. But if we build relationship with the parents, understanding where they come from and what is the issue that they are facing, then we should be able to solve it better. And this all comes with relationship. And if that relationship is not there, the child will not be open to you, and the parents would not be open to you. And in some of the cases, we as educators might see a problem, we as educators might see an issue, and parents don't see it. And this is very common, and parents see from their perspective, which is also right. But where is it that we align our understanding and their understanding into a common understanding based on facts, where it says, here is a fact, let's talk about the fact. Even it happens with us as educators when we are in the classroom and we're teaching, and the principal comes in and observes and says you were doing X, Y, and Z in a different way. And sometimes we are resistant to say that, no, I was not doing that way. But I question if we had a camera in the classroom and that camera was videotaping you or me as a teacher teaching without the administrator, and I watched myself doing this again, how would that look like? A lot of research says that you would find that the mistakes or the things that you were doing, you shouldn't be doing, but you don't realize it. So what I want to say about the parents is they are the best partners they are maybe the only partners in our education for their child, and this is why the partnership with them is based on building relationship. Okay, Afnan is saying, do you think it's part of the teacher's job to have that much of concern on the students, and does it come before teaching lessons or after, which is more important? I say that understanding the student and the need of the student is first priority. And the reason I say this is because if the child does not feel safe, if the child does not feel welcomed, if the child does not feel that the adult in the classroom is the hero there for him or for her, the chances of learning becomes less and less. It happens, but it becomes less and less. And if you take the other way around, if the child feels very safe in an environment, when the child feels like this person is a person I can learn from or be safe with in the classroom. And by safe, I don't mean physically safe. I don't mean like threatened or physically threatened. What I mean is, in a classroom of 20 kids or 25 kids, when that one student makes a mistake, how do we deal with that mistake? If we take that mistake and that mistake becomes a source of bully to the student from the teacher and or from the other students, then guess what? That student will not talk again in your classroom. And the reason is because every time he or she talks, somebody is going to laugh at him or her. So that's the kind of safety that I'm talking about. And as a teacher, we have a role in the classroom to make sure that all students are safe when they ask their questions, when they share their concepts and ideas. And sometimes it might be a very irrelevant idea or a very irrelevant topic, but the way we deal with it is what makes the students safe to talk the next time and or to never talk in the classroom. So having said that, it's our responsibility to make sure that the classroom is safe. It's our responsibility to make sure that the classroom is ready for the students to learn, and this is where their creativity starts. The minute we block their safety, or we say that you can't talk anymore indirectly, or other students start laughing at the student, and this is when you lose it. This is when the student will never be opened again in class. And on the contrary, if we allow that safety, the student will flourish. Asael says, how do you know if a student is ready to learn, and how do you know if they are not ready to learn? I believe all students are ready to learn. And there is no one who is not ready to learn. All of them are ready to learn, but it's their way of learning that makes a difference. And don't forget that students also come from homes where they might have an issue, they might have a problem, and we cannot work with 25 kids in the standard common way, because every one of them comes from a different environment. They have their own issues. The night before, they might have been in the hospital for something, or they might have an issue at home or with their friends sometimes. So all of them are ready to learn, but they have their situations. Understanding these situations makes a difference. But if you make that student feel very bad that day because of that situation, then I think we've lost that student. You said build a connection with the child. I'll be teaching soon, but how do I avoid getting attached to a student? Where do we draw the line? In my experience of 18 or 16 years of working with students, I've never lost a connection to them. And every time we have met with students, either on social media or face-to-face, we have reconnected. I think building a relationship is a long-term relationship, and it's not a bad thing to be attached to the students, because the more they see you attached to them, the more they see you that you are there for them, they will learn better. And of course, there are limits, there are certain, boundaries. And these boundaries, I think, is best that you as a person, as a professional, in your profession, you will be able to draw them. But the more you are for the student, you're the hero for the student will learn better from you. There's a great TED Talk for Ms. Robinson. I'll share it on the post, on the forum also. A wonderful talk about every child needs a hero. And I believe we are the heroes for the children. Okay? I think I'm hearing here that we should be done. This was a great opportunity to be connected to you. I invite you to be on the forum, and we can chat more there, and I'll put some ideas there. And if you don't like the ideas, just delete them. But that's how it is. At the same time, I want to thank Sharek for this wonderful opportunity. This forum, I believe, in my experience of one day with it, and it was amazing, and I was ready to learn and read from it. I want to thank the Center for Teaching, Learning and Research, and Dr. Fatma in particular, and Engineer Muhammad for your great efforts to make this happen, and KFAS for sponsoring this event. I'm honored to be here with you. Thank you very much, and this has been my pleasure. Thank you.